In the last video, we introduced the SAP BTP Document Management Service, and specifically the integration option, which is a set of APIs that lets us access a document repository. Now, we also installed the repository option, so therefore we could also create a repository from the integration option and through an API. This time, we want to introduce the application option, which is a GUI that lets us do pretty much the same thing. It also comes with a mobile component, so we can access the documents through a mobile application. Now, from the application option, you can create a repo. Again, because we have the repository option installed. Now, what's important to note is that if I create a repo from the integration option, I cannot access it through the GUI. But the opposite is not true. So if I create a repo from the application option, from the GUI, I can, in theory, access it through the integration option. If I create a destination and attach that destination to the repo that I created in the application option. We will see all of this, but what's important to note is if I create a repo from the application option, it is accessible through the integration option. But if I create a repository from the integration option, I cannot see it in the GUI in the application option. So let's get started by creating the subscription to the application option. So we go to the instances and subscription area of our tenant and we click Create. And we search for application and we see that we have Document Management Service application option. We select it. Standard plan is fine and we create it. This takes a little bit less time than the integration option. And now it's created. So let's click on the button next to the subscription and open up the GUI. And we open up the GUI, and lo and behold, we don't see anything. And that's because I don't have permission to see anything. So let's go back to the cockpit, and let's open up the role collections. And let's find Document Management Role Collection. And let's edit it. And let's add the roles that we need. Now, in the real-world scenario, you might create several role collections, some for the user, some for the admin, some for the GUI, some for the API. But we're going to continue to put it into one role collection. Now, if you drag down, you will see that there's an application document management application. So we'll open it, and we get a bunch of roles. So the very first role that we want is web admin. Okay? So let's add that, save. Let's go back to the GUI, log out, and log in again. And now you see that we have an application for managing repositories. So what we can do is we can create a repository. And again, because we've enabled repository option in the entitlements, we can do this. So we say we want an internal repository. We'll call it my docs, and we'll say it's from the GUI. Okay. And that's all we need to say. We can enable some other functionality, but we won't for now. And now we have a repo. So now I want to go into the repo and add documents. And if I click on it, it says I could not open it up because I'm missing a role. Okay, the same is true if we go back to the home page. We still only have an application for managing the repos and not for working with the contents. So we will go back to the role collection. We will edit it, and we will add another role. And this one will be web user. And this is the role that's needed to be able to work with the contents. So we'll go back. We will log out. log back in. And now we have an application that lets us manage and view the contents of the repo. So we'll click on this first one. And now we see a tile for the repo. And we can open up the repo and we see that it's empty. So let's add an image. This time I will use my dumplings, picture of the dumplings that I like to make. And I've now put it in the repo and I can click on it and now I can see it. So it's now in the repo. So let's go back to Postman and let's look at our collections. And we want to list the repos that we have. Okay, so let's call the API. And we see that we get the API that we created with the API itself. But that is the only repo we see. Okay, but we know we have a second repo. Okay, now I told you that you can not by default see the repo created in the application option in the GUI automatically from the API. But you can make it connected. You can connect them so that you can access your GUI-produced repo from the API. So the way to do that is two quick things that need to happen. The first is you need to create a destination. This destination can be called anything, and we've already created the destination. So I've called it my DMS repo, but you can call it anything. It needs to have the URL that you got from the service key. So the service URL +/browser. OAuth user token exchange. I believe you could also do client credentials, but we'll say user token exchange. And then you need the client ID, secret, and token service URL, including OAuth token, the same as we did from Postman. Okay? That's all we need to do. So we have a destination that's connected to the integration option or to the API. Now all we have to do is connect the repo created from the GUI so it can be accessed from the API. So let's go back home and let's go to the tile that lets us manage the configuration for repo. And here is our repo, and we'll click on the pencil. And all we need to do is under this drop down, you will see the destinations. And I believe you'll see all destinations that are defined. And you pick the one that you created for this. Okay. Let's also make a note of the repository ID, B746. And we can save this. Okay. So now it is saved. We can go back to Postman and we can send again. And if we collapse, we now see that we get two repos, the B746 that we created in the GUI. So now you've learned how to create the application option, create a repo, add the roles that you need to access the GUI, and how to connect the API DMS service to the application option so that your repo created with the GUI can be accessed by the API.